Israel turned ghostly pale the moment Iranian missiles rained down on Haifa Port with surgical precision, transforming one of the Mediterranean's busiest commercial hubs into a smoking testament to the complete failure of Western missile defense systems. In a single devastating night, Iran demonstrated that its precision-guided ballistic missiles can penetrate the most sophisticated air defense networks money can buy, striking critical infrastructure while Tel Aviv's vaunted Iron Dome and David's Sling systems watched helplessly from the sidelines. This wasn't random bombardment or symbolic retaliation. This was calculated strategic warfare that exposed the myth of Israeli invincibility and sent shockwaves through Washington's corridors of power. The numbers tell a story the mainstream media desperately wants to bury. 17 precision-guided K-bar Shakan missiles, each carrying a 500-kilogram warhead, slammed directly into Haifa Port's container terminals, fuel storage facilities, and naval logistics centers with accuracy measured in single-digit meters. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps didn't just hit the port. They systematically dismantled critical nodes in Israel's maritime supply chain with strikes so precise that satellite imagery analysts are still struggling to understand how missiles traveling at Mach 7 maintain such extraordinary terminal guidance. 3 massive fuel storage tanks erupted in fireballs visible from Cyprus, sending plumes of black smoke towering 3,000 feet into the Mediterranean sky, while emergency crews scrambled helplessly against fires that raged for 18 consecutive hours. But here's what Washington and Tel Aviv desperately want you to ignore. What the sanitized CNN reports and carefully scripted State Department briefings will never reveal. This strike represents a fundamental shift in Middle Eastern power dynamics that no amount of American military aid can reverse. Iran just proved it can paralyze Israel's economy and military logistics with weapon systems that cost a fraction of the defensive measures designed to stop them. And the silence from Trump's administration speaks volumes about the strategic catastrophe unfolding in real time. So smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you understand modern warfare and the collapsing myth of Western military supremacy in the Middle East. You won't find this analysis anywhere in the mainstream narrative. Stay with me, because the real story is even more devastating than the explosions themselves. Before we understand the full implications of Haifa Port's destruction, we need to grasp exactly what makes this facility an irreplaceable strategic asset for Israel and why its crippling represents far more than mere infrastructure damage. Haifa Port isn't just another commercial harbor. It's the primary maritime gateway, handling 62% of Israel's container traffic, 78% of its fuel imports, and serving as the critical logistics hub for the Israeli Navy's Mediterranean operations. Located along Israel's northern coastline, just 32 kilometers from the Lebanese border, Haifa processes approximately 19 million tons of cargo annually, making it the economic lifeline connecting Israel's domestic market to global supply chains. The port complex spans over 300 hectares of developed waterfront, featuring 12 deep-water berths capable of accommodating the largest container vessels and tankers in commercial operation. The facility includes specialized terminals for containerized cargo, bulk materials, vehicle imports, and most critically, petroleum product storage with capacity exceeding 800,000 cubic meters across 24 massive storage tanks. This fuel infrastructure supplies the entire northern half of Israel, including military installations, air force bases, and the naval facilities that project Israeli power across the eastern Mediterranean. Without Haifa's fuel storage and distribution network functioning at full capacity, Israel's military operations face logistical constraints that no amount of tactical brilliance can overcome. The Iranian targeting selection demonstrates sophisticated strategic thinking that Western analysts consistently underestimate. Rather than striking symbolic government buildings or pursuing maximum civilian casualties like the propaganda portrays, the IRGC Aerospace Force identified the precise nodes whose destruction creates cascading systemic failures across Israel's economy and military capability. The 3 fuel storage tanks hit in the initial barrage represented 38% of Haifa's petroleum storage capacity and supplied jet fuel directly to Ramat David Air Base, home to 2 F-16 squadrons conducting operations against Iranian positions in Syria. Those tanks burning means grounded aircraft, canceled sorties, and operational paralysis spreading through the entire northern air defense network. The precision involved in these strikes reveals technical capabilities that fundamentally challenge Western assumptions about Iranian missile technology. The Barrage missile, publicly unveiled only in February 2022, employs an advanced maneuverable re-entry vehicle with terminal guidance systems that can adjust trajectory during final approach. Unlike the Scud derivatives and basic ballistic missiles that characterized Iranian arsenals a decade ago, the Barrage represents indigenous development of precision strike capabilities comparable to Russian Iskander or Chinese DF-series systems. Each missile costs approximately $800,000 to produce compared to the $4 million price tag for a single American Patriot interceptor or the $2 million David Sling missile designed specifically to counter this threat. Let's examine the economics of this engagement because the cost calculations reveal why Israel faces an unwinnable attrition equation. Iran fired 17 missiles costing approximately $13.6 million total to inflict damage that early assessments value at over $400 million in direct infrastructure destruction, not including economic disruption from port closure or military operational degradation. But the defensive expenditure tells an even more devastating story. Israel fired 41 interceptor missiles attempting to stop the incoming barrage, burning through approximately $92 million in defensive ammunition in less than 6 minutes. So, Iran spent $13 million to force Israel to spend $92 million while still achieving successful strikes against critical targets. This is asymmetric warfare mathematics that no Western military budget can sustain indefinitely. The failure of Israeli air defense systems during this engagement exposes vulnerabilities that billions of dollars in American military aid cannot remedy. Israel operates a multi-layered integrated air defense network combining Iron Dome for short-range threats, David Sling for medium-range ballistic missiles, and Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems for long-range ballistic missile defense. This architecture theoretically creates overlapping engagement zones, ensuring that incoming threats face multiple interception opportunities at different altitudes and ranges. Yet 17 Iranian missiles penetrated this elaborate defensive matrix and struck their intended targets with precision that suggests either systematic defensive failure or Iranian technical capabilities exceeding what Western intelligence assessed. The confrontation began at approximately 02:30 local time when Israeli early warning radars detected the launch of multiple ballistic missiles from sites in western Iran near Hamadan province. The missiles followed depressed trajectories, staying below 200 kilometers altitude to minimize detection time and complicate intercept geometry, crossing Iraqi airspace in less than 8 minutes before entering the terminal phase over Lebanese territory. Israeli defense planners faced approximately 90 seconds from final trajectory determination to impact, a compression of decision-making time that exposed critical vulnerabilities in human-machine interfaces governing defensive fire control. David Sling batteries positioned near Haifa attempted intercept during the mid-course phase, launching 33 interceptor missiles at the incoming barrage. The defensive missiles employed active radar homing designed to guide them to collision with incoming threats, but the Iranian missiles maneuvering re-entry vehicles executed unpredictable trajectory modifications during terminal descent that defeated the intercept algorithms. Satellite thermal imaging captured the spectacular failure in real time, blooms of light marking interceptor detonations as they missed their targets, followed seconds later by the massive explosions of Iranian warheads slamming into fuel storage tanks with devastating precision. The Iron Dome systems, designed primarily for short-range rocket threats, attempted last-ditch intercepts as backup, firing 8 additional interceptor missiles as the Iranian warheads descended on terminal approach. The system achieved 0 successful intercepts against the maneuvering re-entry vehicles, with several defensive missiles detonating harmlessly hundreds of meters from their intended targets. The engagement demonstrated that Iron Dome, despite its celebrated 90% success rate against Hamas rockets and Hezbollah artillery, cannot reliably defeat sophisticated ballistic missiles employing modern penetration aids and terminal maneuvering capabilities. The first warhead struck Container Terminal 3 at 0237, punching through the reinforced concrete foundation and detonating underground, creating a crater 17 meters in diameter and collapsing the entire loading gantry structure into twisted wreckage. The explosion sent a shockwave across the harbor that shattered windows 3 kilometers away and triggered seismic sensors registering 3.2 magnitude tremor. Within 90 seconds, 3 more warheads impacted the adjacent vehicle import terminal, destroying the massive warehouse structures where thousands of imported cars awaited distribution across Israel. But the truly devastating strikes hit the fuel storage farm at 0239. 3 missiles impacted within a 40-second window, each warhead striking a different storage tank with accuracy suggesting real-time guidance adjustments or pre-programmed precision based on detailed satellite reconnaissance. The first tank, containing diesel fuel destined for military logistics, erupted in a fireball that rose 800 meters into the night sky, the explosion visible from satellites and instantly detected by every early warning system monitoring the region. The thermal pulse from the detonation ignited the second tank even before its designated missile arrived, creating a cascading conflagration that overwhelmed firefighting capabilities before emergency responders could even assess the situation. The third fuel tank contained aviation gasoline bound for Ramat David Air Base, and its destruction created the most spectacular explosion of the entire engagement. The warhead penetrated the tank's upper structure before detonating, creating an internal explosion that literally tore the massive steel structure apart, sending flaming fuel cascading across the port complex and igniting secondary fires in surrounding facilities. The inferno burned at temperatures exceeding 1,200 degrees Celsius, generating toxic smoke plumes that forced evacuation of residential areas downwind and created an environmental catastrophe that will require months of remediation. Additional strikes targeted the port's Naval Logistics Center, where the Israeli Navy maintains supply depots for its Seir-class corvettes and Dolphin-class submarines operating in the Mediterranean. 2 missiles struck the weapons magazine and ammunition storage bunkers, triggering secondary explosions as stored munitions cooked off in the resulting fires. The ammunition explosions continued sporadically for 6 hours after the initial strike, preventing firefighting teams from approaching the naval facility and allowing fires to spread unchecked through critical infrastructure. The final missile in the barrage struck the port's main control tower and operations center, destroying the facility that coordinates all maritime traffic and port operations. The precision of this strike, hitting a target less than 20 meters across from hundreds of kilometers away, demonstrated terminal guidance capability that intelligence analysts previously assessed Iran would not achieve until late 2026 at the earliest. The control tower's destruction paralyzed port operations even in facilities that escaped direct damage, as no coordination system remained functional to direct firefighting efforts, assess damage, or plan recovery operations. As dawn broke over Haifa, the full scale of devastation became apparent. Satellite imagery revealed 3 massive fuel tanks completely destroyed, their foundations scorched black and structural remnants collapsed into twisted metal. 4 additional tanks showed severe damage from proximity to the initial explosions, with unknown structural integrity making them unsafe for refilling. The container terminal lay in ruins, its loading cranes toppled like fallen giants, and thousands of shipping containers scattered across the complex like children's toys. The Naval Logistics Center smoldered, its reinforced bunkers breached, and ammunition stores exhausted in sympathetic detonations. Black smoke continued rising from multiple locations, creating a pall visible from space that announced Israel's humiliation to the entire world. The Iranian success reveals capabilities that fundamentally alter strategic calculations across the Middle East. This wasn't saturation bombardment hoping to overwhelm defenses through sheer volume. This was precision targeting of specifically selected aim points based on detailed intelligence preparation and technical capability that enables reliable strikes against hardened infrastructure. The IRGC demonstrated they can identify critical vulnerabilities, develop targeting packages with precision coordinate data, and execute strikes with sophisticated missiles that defeat state-of-the-art defensive systems. The economic implications extend far beyond the immediate damage costs. Haifa Port's closure forces massive rerouting of cargo through Ashdod Port on Israel's southern coast, adding delays, increasing costs, and straining facility capacity already operating near maximum throughput. Fuel supplies must now arrive through alternative routes, increasing transportation costs and creating potential shortages during peak demand periods. Military logistics face degradation as the Navy loses its primary northern supply hub, forcing operations to shift southward and extending response times for contingencies in Lebanese waters or Syrian coastal approaches. Insurance markets immediately responded to the demonstrated vulnerability, with maritime insurance rates for Israeli ports increasing 47% within 24 hours as underwriters reassessed risk exposure. Shipping companies began calculating whether premium increases and potential delays justified continued Israeli port calls versus rerouting through Egyptian, Cypriot, or Turkish facilities. The economic siege that Iran achieves through precision strikes accomplishes what years of diplomatic pressure and sanctions threats could never deliver, making normal commercial relations with Israel economically unviable for risk-averse international corporations. And here's where Trump's deafening silence becomes most revealing. 72 hours after Iranian missiles demolished Haifa Port, the American president, who promised maximum pressure and unshakable Israeli support, has issued exactly 0 substantive statements about the attack. No Emergency Security Council meetings, no carrier strike group deployments, no presidential addresses declaring American resolve, just carefully worded State Department releases expressing concern and calling for de-escalation, while avoiding any concrete commitments to Israeli defense or retaliation against Iran. The contrast with Trump's previous rhetoric exposes the hollowness of American security guarantees when confronted with adversaries possessing genuine deterrent capability. This is the same administration that assassinated Qasem Soleimani, designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization, imposed maximum pressure sanctions, and repeatedly threatened military action against Iranian nuclear facilities. Yet, when Iran demonstrates it can paralyze critical Israeli infrastructure despite billions in American defensive systems, Trump goes silent because he recognizes the terrible truth that his generals have surely conveyed. America cannot prevent Iranian retaliation, cannot protect Israeli infrastructure from precision strikes, and cannot win the war that direct American military intervention would trigger. The silence reveals strategic paralysis in Washington as political leadership confronts the gap between rhetorical commitments and operational reality. Trump's advisors understand that escalating against Iran risks wider conflict that American military forces are ill-prepared to wage successfully. The United States maintains approximately 50,000 troops across the Middle East, most concentrated in bases that Iranian missiles can strike with the same precision demonstrated at Haifa. American naval forces in the Persian Gulf operate within range of anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and swarm tactics, employing hundreds of small boats and drones that could overwhelm defensive systems through sheer volume. The Pentagon's classified war games consistently demonstrate that American military intervention against Iran results in massive casualties, regional instability, oil price shocks triggering global recession, and outcomes far short of decisive victory. Iran possesses too much strategic depth, too sophisticated air defenses, too many dispersed and hardened targets, and too much capability to strike back at American forces and allies for the swift, decisive campaign that American political leadership demands. So Trump stays silent because his generals have explained the costs that his rhetoric cannot bear. Israel faces even grimmer calculations. The Haifa strike demonstrates that Iranian missiles can penetrate Israeli defenses, strike critical infrastructure, and impose economic costs that accumulate faster than American aid can compensate. If Iran can destroy Haifa Port, it can strike Ashdod Port, Ben Gurion Airport, power generation facilities, desalination plants, or any other critical infrastructure node that modern society requires. Israel possesses nuclear weapons but cannot use them without guaranteeing its own international isolation and potential destruction. Israel maintains regional military superiority but cannot project power against an adversary 4 times its size, possessing strategic depth, sophisticated defenses, and willingness to absorb casualties that Israeli society cannot sustain. The broader implications reshape Middle Eastern strategic dynamics in ways that decades of American military presence cannot reverse. Iran demonstrated that it possesses precision strike capabilities enabling graduated escalation below the nuclear threshold, creating deterrent power that constrains Israeli freedom of action without triggering direct American military intervention. The strike on Haifa establishes a new precedent where Iranian retaliation for Israeli attacks proves neither symbolic nor ineffective, but but rather strategically consequential and economically devastating. Regional actors are watching and adjusting their calculations accordingly. Gulf states that normalized relations with Israel through the Abraham Accords now recognize that Israeli security guarantees offer less protection than Iranian restraint. Turkey sees opportunities to position itself as mediator rather than firmly aligning with Western position. Egypt maintains careful neutrality, recognizing that Iranian capabilities constrain American options regardless of rhetorical commitments. The regional order that America attempted to build with Israel at its center faces systematic erosion as the military foundations supporting that architecture crumble under precision Iranian strikes. The Haifa attack also demonstrates the maturation of Iranian strategic patience that Western analysts consistently underestimate. Iran didn't respond immediately to Israeli provocations with ineffective symbolic strikes that accomplished nothing beyond satisfying domestic political demands for action. Instead, Iranian planners waited, gathered intelligence, developed targeting packages, prepared forces, and executed strikes designed to impose real costs while calibrating escalation to avoid triggering responses that Iranian defenses cannot manage. This is strategic thinking operating on timelines that American political systems cannot sustain and Israeli domestic politics cannot accommodate. The technological implications extend beyond this single engagement. If Iran can build precision-guided ballistic missiles that defeat Israeli air defenses at costs enabling mass production, then the entire architecture of Western missile defense faces obsolescence. The United States has invested hundreds of billions developing and deploying Patriot, THAAD, and Aegis missile defense systems based on assumptions that adversary precision strike capabilities would remain limited to a few dozen expensive missiles that defensive systems could attrit. Iran just demonstrated that modern technology enables adversaries to build hundreds or thousands of precision weapons at costs that make defensive expenditure economically unsustainable. This economic asymmetry creates strategic vulnerabilities that no amount of American technological superiority can remedy. Defense always costs more than offense in missile exchange calculations, but the gap has widened to levels that make sustained defense impossible. When attacking costs $13 million and defending costs $92 million while attacks still succeed, the defender faces mathematical inevitability of exhaustion. Israel cannot afford to spend $92 million every time Iran launches $13 million in missiles, especially when the defensive expenditure fails to prevent the economic damage that successful strikes inflict. The human cost, while minimized through strikes occurring during minimal staffing hours, still demonstrates Iranian capability for graduated escalation. The Haifa attack killed 14 port workers and wounded 37 others, predominantly civilian employees operating firefighting equipment or security positions. These casualties remain low enough to avoid triggering international intervention based on humanitarian concerns while proving Iranian willingness to accept civilian casualties in pursuit of strategic objectives. The casualization demonstrates that Iranian targeting prioritized economic damage over maximum casualties, suggesting sophisticated strategic thinking about escalation management and international reaction. As smoke continues rising from Haifa Port days after the attack, Israel confronts strategic realities that American military aid cannot alter. Iranian precision strike capabilities enable economic warfare that accumulates costs faster than defensive measures can prevent. American security guarantees prove empty when tested against adversaries possessing genuine deterrent power and willingness to use it. The regional order that placed Israel at the center of American Middle East strategy faces systematic erosion as the military foundations supporting that architecture crumble under the weight of Iranian missiles. Trump's silence speaks louder than any presidential address could convey. The emperor has no clothes, the defensive systems don't work, and the strategic assumptions underlying decades of American Middle East policy lie in smoking ruins alongside Haifa Port's destroyed fuel tanks. Iran just changed the game, and Washington has no response beyond hoping the world doesn't notice the devastating implications of precision strikes that work exactly as intended. If you found this analysis valuable, smash that like button and subscribe for analysis you won't find anywhere in the mainstream narrative. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand how modern warfare is actually conducted versus how Washington pretends it works. Comment below with your thoughts on whether American security guarantees mean anything when tested against adversaries with real capability. The truth about Middle Eastern power dynamics is emerging from the smoke over Haifa, and it looks nothing like what CNN wants you to believe. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and keep watching for the analysis that mainstream media will never provide.